What do you hate most about apartment living? Your downstairs neighbors with a bed bug problem they refuse to take care of, and the bugs keep wandering up into your apartment. We had to clear out of our apartment to get it fully treated multiple times, even though they never found any evidence that the bugs were actually living in our apartment. I was getting bitten, and every time they sent the exterminator over they'd be like, "Yeah, you guys don't have any bugs." I don't know, they won't let us into the apartment downstairs, but that's definitely the source. We called the city, bedbug dog came, no bugs, but at least it went on the building's record. With bedbugs you have to wash basically every piece of cloth you own, none of which the building would pay for. Probably spent a good $500 just on laundry. Bedbugs take a coordinated building-wide effort to get rid of, and they would only send the exterminators over to the specific apartment that put in a request. I hate hearing other people's music, especially bass. Drives me insane. I lived in an apartment once where the neighbor always left his radio on blasting through the speakers. It was always on this local country station, and you would think that country wouldn't have that much bass, but oh, you are wrong. Never again. Laundry. I live in Texas, and carrying a heavy laundry basket down a flight of stairs all the way across the complex to the tiny laundry room was awful in the Texas humidity and heat that you have for 80% of the year. Then the laundry room itself was barely functional, maybe 7 washers total for the whole place, and 8 dryers. You'd have to be lucky or get used to doing laundry at weird hours to find a machine for just one load. And that's if the things worked. Because the place was 40 years old, their machines were awful and barely worked half the time. And it wasn't a binary does or does not work. Sometimes you wouldn't know it didn't work until you open the lid and oops, the water never drained, so now my clothes are 15 pounds each with water in them. Or oops, the dryers don't work at all, so you actually have to run them twice unless you want damp clothes. All this on top of the room not having proper air conditioning. So if it was during the day you would have sweat going down your back just from standing still, and if it was at night time there were a lot more bugs out, so it was sweaty and extra gross. I wish none of that was an exaggeration either. That was easily the worst case scenario of the apartments I lived in. Others were slightly better in 1 or 2 categories, but on average that's just how it was. And obviously while they weren't ghetto, they weren't exactly high quality. The laundry room situation in apartments older than like 20 years is abysmal. The last place I lived, the alarm was so bad that it was one of the reasons we moved. When it went off, it was so loud that I immediately would curl up on bed or drop to the floor with my hand over my ears trying to breathe through it to see if it would stop. That loud, I kid you not. On top of it, there were strobe lights throughout, and I'm epileptic. If I did manage to make it out, there would be a crowd of people out there whose dogs were still crying from the volume of the alarm. The fire station was very nearby. They never needed to get a call. That alarm was so ear-splittingly loud that they heard it from down the street and would just head over. Oh my god, we only lived in an apartment one time, but when we did we had this type of neighbor. She didn't work but her husband did, and she was the utmost piece of work. She never understood why everyone left the complex before fulfilling their lease, because she was the cause of it. Finally, after several blow-ups between us and her, she was finally kicked out. We bought a house several months later, but the vacancy in that complex has changed drastically since she was kicked out. They are always at full capacity now. Whereas before the apartments were vacant every few months and nobody wanted to fulfill their lease. Rent. When I bought my first house, I remember running the numbers and realizing that owning would be several hundreds of dollars less per month than renting. The problem is saving up the several thousand you need for that down payment while you're paying rent. It's a vicious cycle, and as they say, it's expensive to be poor. The constant shuffle to stay in a good apartment complex. You have to move every few years to keep ahead of it. Just like any other type of business, apartment complexes go through cycles. When they're first built and brand new, they're luxury apartments where you have to pay a premium and make X times rent per month to even qualify. That premium filters the tenant base, and at first it's mostly working professionals and families in the process of moving from one house to another and renting for 6 to 12 months in the meantime. The complex is quiet. There's no crime. The shared spaces are clean. There's no mischief or property damage. You can leave your door unlocked while you go for a jog, or your garage open while you run inside to grab something you forgot. Really not much different from living in a suburban neighborhood. But after some years, these complexes start to decline. Then after some more years, eventually they change management hands a few times and the new management ends up scraping the Section 8 barrel looking to fill every unit to recoup their investment. This decline is very noticeable and very predictable to people who have been living there for a while. Littering increases dramatically as this process goes on. Cigarettes and chicken bones everywhere. Don't ask me why those two things, I have no clue. There starts to be more aggressive dog breeds that make jogging a hassle at best. Noise increases dramatically as well. Parties. Loud music at all hours. Angry lovers screaming in the parking lot at midnight. Unemployed family members hanging around and causing mischief and engaging in petty theft. You absolutely cannot leave your garage open if you're not actively watching it, as your neighbor's loser boyfriend will start looking at your tools. You can't stop the cycle. All you can do is carefully research the complex before you rent to try and figure out where in the cycle that complex is and eat the expense of moving every 3 to 5 years to keep ahead of the people that come. Honestly, I really like my apartment. People talk about how they hate the noise, but if anything, I'm the loud one, though of course only during the afternoon and evenings. I'm not even that loud either. It's all one story, so no footsteps or chairs above me. Insects are under control, and because of the size limit of animals, there's no real audible barking. My neighbors are respectful and all, and I even hold conversations with my Latino neighbor from time to time. There are enough parking spaces, and there's a field right in front of us, though you can't garden in it or anything. Rent is also very cheap despite being completely habitable in the middle of our city beside the high school and college. The only problem I've come across is it's a little small, so storage is limited, and that toilets are slow to flush. However, these are all easily able to be worked around. It's really nice, and as a simple man, I could honestly see myself living here for the rest of my youth. Rent increases and neighbors moving in or out. Our rent increased by a total of 50% from the time we moved in to the time we moved out, over 6 years. I understand inflation and everything, but I think our record of 0 complaints, made by us, or against us, and always paying early or on time with a certified money order, they did not accept cash or card, would have afforded us some leniency with rent hikes. Neighbor shuffle was an irritating thing. Get used to and acclimated to neighbors living above, beside, and across from you, and they're gone in a few months once the lease is up. Rinse, repeat for 6 years. The initial apprehension of not knowing who you're dealing with each time gets tiring. While the convenience to everything in the city, next to 0 fuel costs, and low utility bills were nice, when we discovered we could get a 15-year mortgage for a house that was triple our apartment size for $50 less than rent, we decided it was time to bail. A Thanksgiving Day break-in sealed the deal. Now I don't have to deal with many of the other issues most people would when living in an apartment. I basically live in a small, single-story townhouse. But it's still classified as an apartment. Landlord is cool, maintenance is Johnny on the spot, when you need them, etc. I'm extremely grateful. But the one thing that always gets me nervous and stressed is when a new neighbor moves in next to me or directly across. Always scared that they'll be loud, obnoxious, have barking dogs, bother me when I'm chilling outside, have kids that make noise, etc. A new neighbor just moved in last month and I was crossing my fingers the whole time they would mellow like the last neighbor. My only issue with them was their dog, who would bark at literally anything that moved. So far, the dude is completely chill, makes no noise and has no pets. But yeah, it sucks getting used to a neighbor and their habits and then they move, making you stress that the new person might be a nightmare, like my first neighbor. Thank you for listening to Campfire TTS. Please like, comment, and subscribe.